welcome back to the Body Pod, everyone. Today we have a friend slash neighbor slash coach of mine, past coach Tom Danielson, professional cyclist, and now owns his own cycling business that we will jump into. But welcome, Tom. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Super
So,
pumped.
Tom, for any endurance athlete on here is going to know your name, but like, I want you to just start and tell people your whole cycling story from when you fell in love with it, when you knew you wanted to kind of have this as a profession, how you got into the tour and being one of the top riders, and then kind of how you transitioned into your business.
Yeah, it's pretty long story for that, so I'm not gonna get too crazy into that. But yeah, I mean, as a kid, got into motocross, and then from that found mountain biking, and then mountain biking, I was good at that. Won all kinds of races, and in my teens, I got really obsessed with competition and competing at the highest level with mountain biking. Traveled all over the country, did world championships, and just really fell in love with cycling, and then also competition. And I just remember one of my friends in high school, their parents asked me, are you going to race the Tour de France one day? And I said no. That's way over my head. And fast forward, I ended up finding road cycling when I was in Colorado. Went to college in Fort Lewis and Durango, Colorado, and then from there just found mountains, and I was good at mountains, and people were like, hey, you should ride road bikes, and got into road cycling in Durango. And then in the road racing, I raced mostly mountain races. And it turns out in road cycling, a good mountain climber is valuable, right? Not very many people are really good at it.
Mhm.
And you know the a lot of the biggest races like the Tour de France come down to the mountains.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I was a good climber. I did well. I turned pro in the U.S. Did well in the pro races in the states, and I did one international race in Malaysia, Tour of Langkawi,
Wow.
huge mountain called Genting Highlands, and I won that stage race, which is a big international stage race as an American. And that really opened the door for me to race at the World Tour level, which is the highest level there is. It would be equivalent to like the NFL or NBA, right? It's primarily in Europe, and when you're in the World Tour, you just race big international races. And so
Mhm.
I signed my first World Tour contract back in 2004. So I did 1 year professional in the U.S. and then went World Tour. I raced for an Italian team called Fossa Bortolo, and then on that team, I got my feet wet with European cycling at the World Tour level, which was insane. Very, very, very hard, very intense, very cutthroat, completely different sport than what is raced in the U.S. And from that point, I got a contract on Discovery Channel, which I raced with Lance Armstrong, and did that for a bunch of years. Won a lot of big races on that team, and then I signed with the next team, which was Garmin Slipstream, American team, still going on. That team is still going strong as EF, and then I raced the rest of my career on that team. So about, yeah, 8 years on the Slipstream team, and did all kinds of races, including Tour de France. Got eighth in the Tour de France. Won stages in the Grand Tours. Won a bunch of U.S. or big U.S. races, big international stage races as well. Had a good career. And yeah, then my career ended, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. So I started a business, and yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, your husband is in the advertising world, and my degree was in marketing. I thought I would do something in that world, and so when my career ended, I went and met with John Windsor. That was a particular person in the Boulder
Yeah.
community that I knew through cycling that was pretty big in the marketing world.
Yeah.
He owned an advertising agency at the time, and I went to him and I said, "Hey, can you help me? I need to get a job. Like, I don't have my cycling career anymore. I don't know what to do. I have this marketing degree. Like, I like advertising. Like, can you help me?" And he said, you should start a business. And I was like, what? Like, start a business, and he, yeah, you should start it. You should become a cycling coach. And I was like, well, cycling coaches are like pretty lame. At the time, cycling coaching was like, and it still is today, was just like regurgitated workouts essentially, right? Like just
Mhm.
generic plans and workouts, and not very much teaching. And so I took his advice. My wife and my wife Courtney and I started a business, and we decided to make it unique. And it was cycling coaching, but it was focused more around like teaching people the sport of cycling, using what I learned in the Tour de France level of the sport to help people become better cyclists and build real fitness that help them in the sport of cycling, but also off the bike. And then the most important thing is, yes, the sport of cycling like ultimately saved my life. Like after my career ended, like it helped me find mental health and physical health, and purpose and
Mhm.
confidence, like going to people like John Windsor and saying, hey, can you help me? It's the sport that really gave me that. So we really put that in our program, and today we've grown our business quite a bit. It's a pretty big cycling coaching business, but most of our people are focused on using cycling to better their lives, like I did.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna rewind back to when I met you at Crispin Porter Burgeski. I don't know what year it was, probably 2013-ish, or no, maybe even earlier. But anyhow, I remember meeting you and being like, "Gosh, that's Tom Danielson." Because anywhere still in Colorado, anything that you go up, like Mount Evans, Pikes Peak, all of these races, it's like, who's the all-time fastest? Tom Danielson, Tom Danielson, Tom Danielson. I'm like, nobody could knock you off your throne. Like, I'm glad I'm a chick. I don't know the chick who owns all of those. It may fluctuate, but so I mean, obviously, I was aware of you when I met you and kind of moved to Boulder and got into cycling myself. But I also like, once you start getting in cycling, I was in, more into triathlon at the time, and now I'm more focused on cycling, although I'm not racing or anything. I just love it. But I remember reading about you in the secret race. I'm sure you're in multiple books, but I was like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. So how was it writing with Lance? And how was it just like those years on the tour? Because I always was like, the fittest athletes in the world are the people like doing Ironman Kona until I started watching the tour. And I'm like, you guys have to be on for what, 30 days riding your
It's
hardest?
21 days is the tour.
21. Still,
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
still a long time to be on.
there's no days off.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. And yeah, to answer your first question, yeah, it was really cool racing with Lance. Riding with Lance, training with Lance. Like I learned a lot, and one of the big things with Cinch is really the best ways to transfer the teachings and the information, the habits, things like that to your clients, right? And so
Mhm.
Lance, for example, like I learned a lot about discipline, doing what you say you're going to do, performance, mindset, overcoming adversity, like just being a teammate with him, and being on the team that essentially he owned,
Mhm.
he ran. Like I learned so much about things that really take you to the highest level, right? Um, him in particular, like his mindset is so strong, right? And that for me was a big thing. Like, and what I do a lot in Cinch now is really work with people on being proactive with their mindset. And so Lance
Mhm.
was extremely proactive. He created situations, right? He ran the show. If he was at risk of being out of control, he found ways to be back in control. And that's important, right? Like in professional sport, it seems like you're a pawn, right? In this game. It seems like you can be helpless, and then in life, right? Like with all kinds of adversity, it can seem like you have no control. Lance definitely took ownership in everything, and by doing that, good and bad, was able to gain control of how he could take the reins and perform his best or have his team perform his best. I also learned a lot about leadership. Was an incredible leader for the team, and really the things that I learned from him, that I try to deploy in Cinch with leadership is he really made decisions right away, like knew what to do, but even, you know, maybe he didn't know exactly how it was going to work out, but came to the best case scenario quickly, and then just made these strong, consistent decisions. And I think that's important in leadership, where especially like in business and in professional sport, when if you sit there and start analyzing everything, you can pretty much find evidence to send you in any direction, right? And
Yes.
this is where like experience comes in, where you can digest the evidence and you can quickly process it and say, well, from my experience, the data or the evidence shows this is the best decision, and quickly make it. that's
Mhm.
that's a really good leader, right? And
Yeah.
so in Cinch, I try to use that same methodology, right? Where, if people ask me a question, they're looking for advice, they're looking for guidance, like I quickly go to experience. And if I don't have the experience, I go to someone that does have the experience, get the answer, and then give that person that feedback timely and very confidently. And the more you do that, the better you get at it. And I think that's an important trait as a coach, right? You don't need to know everything, but like Lance didn't know everything, but knowing who does know,
Mm.
and having their phone number, right, is
For
key.
sure.
And I think my experience in professional sport, working with people like Lance and other people, has given me the phone numbers of the people that do have the answers,
Yeah.
and can quickly get, if I don't have the experience or the right process, can quickly get that for those people.
Yeah,
So
and
those
uh,
are the things that I learned from him, and yeah, just really really cool experience. Definitely a highlight in my career.
well, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I remember watching you race the tour, but a few things stuck out. Number 1, somebody told me just yesterday, a business mentor, that was like, once you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're done." And you mentioned, like, reaching out to people, which I always am like, "Oh, I partner with these amazing people that are way smarter than me, because I'm never gonna be the smartest person in the room," and I'm okay with that, but I know who to call when they do. And I think with coaching, when you mentioned coaching is an art, there's real life experience,
Mhm.
and then there's, what you call generic plans. And I like how Cinch, you can take that, which is, it's hard. It's hard for a consumer. And I'm sure you've come across this. I come across it all the time where, someone's like, branding is really part of it and getting people to like you, because they're like, well, this person with 2 million followers, they for sure know what they're doing. And, they can write a plan where you're like, it's not about that. And the consumer, it's really hard to decide, who has it. And so I'm always like, what does their background look
Yep.
like? What have they done? Which, I mean, yours speaks for itself. You've had the real life experience of knowing what makes a great coach and how to write a good program, because you lived it at the top, the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, you have some interesting points, and for me, like one of my biggest frustrations racing professional uh, in cycling was the coaching, right? Like
Mhm.
in cycling coaching, and I'm gonna give a bit of a rant right now, but like there's a lot of the like science driven training, right? Like so many people that are coaches are like sports scientists. And
Mhm.
I think the sports scientists are important, but they're a piece of the puzzle, right? They give the techniques, and they give the evidence behind the techniques. But then you need another person that has experience in the sport
Yes.
to take those techniques and take that methodology that's been proven and
Mhm.
implement it in a way that it works the way the sport works. And as a coach, like I see this as the biggest disconnect, because I experienced it myself when I was racing, where it was like everybody was saying, okay, this is the way to train. You train this particular way. For example, zone 2, right? This is hot again. Well, for me, like, yeah, I think it was like 2010 was
Mhm.
when like everybody started talking about zone 2 in the pro peloton, right? Like, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, you know, zone 2 is all you need, and you got to do a lot of it. And I remember doing it myself, and then getting my butt kicked in races, right? And I'm like, I think there might be more to this than this, right?
Mhm.
Like, it was like, well, why am I getting dropped on this climb when, I'm doing all the training and the things that you're asking for? And the answer, the coaches couldn't give, right? They didn't have that information other than, looks like you need more power or more
Mm.
fitness, right? And what ends up happening a lot at the highest level in cycling is that the professional athletes, they race each other many times throughout the year, and those competitions ultimately raise their fitness level. So you asked me about the Tour de France and 21 days. Well, prior to that, you'll do 40 days of racing, right? And so, you know clumps of 10-day stage races and 5-day stage races and 1-day races and training camps, and through all that, right, through all that training and then racing, your body is learning with the way the sport is. And so a lot of the world tour people, they don't necessarily are coached to get to that level. They have the talent to get in the door, and then they start racing each other in these races that you either sink or swim, right? Like, you
Yeah.
either survive or you get shot out the back,
Mhm.
right? And the people that survive, their bodies train they get trained to do these things. And so my frustration was, like, I was a lot of times close to the win, but not getting the win. And I was like, well, what do I have to do different? Nobody could give me an answer, right?
Mm.
Nobody could say, well, this particular rider is doing this, and this particular rider is doing. It was always more weight, or excuse me, more power, less weight, more
Yeah.
training. It was either more or less, more rest, less, less volume, or more volume. It was never like, you need to do these things. And if you, like, look at, like, the business world, John Windsor, for example, like, you go in and talk to these people, and it's like, they look at your business, or they look at your thing, and they're like, you need to do this. This is this is what you do. And for me, it was like, well, that needs to exist in cycling,
Yeah.
because it's like, more is not possible for most people. And
Yeah.
most people can't go to races to get ready for races.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people have one race day that they can do. Like you, for example, you're going to the Spain camp, the Pyrenees. Like, it's like most people have to train for the Pyrenees, like in Colorado, or I mean, you have it pretty good. They might be in Indiana or something like that. So there needs to be a system where you can train for these things
Mhm.
without having to do them. And so that's what cinch ultimately is closing that gap, and bringing the information, the science, the methods, the strategies that you know I've learned and currently exist at the highest level of the sport, and then combining those with my experience as an athlete, as a racer. I can see the sport three-dimensional, right? I've got my butt kicked by it, and I've won
Yeah.
at the same.
Yeah.
I've done it all, and I've been teammates with the best of the best, right? And
Yeah.
so I've seen how they dissect it, how they break it down, and so that's what we do, right? Is combine all those things together in a very unique way, and so there's never any cracks. If someone's not improving, we know exactly where they need to work next, and you will never hear me say you need to ride more or you need to eat less. Those are the things that I will never say as a coach, because, like, as a pro athlete, that's all you would hear, right?
Okay, so I know this is not your world of like, our worlds are very different, but you just nailed it on the head because every female that comes to me is like, well, okay, my weight's not going anywhere. I'm getting slower. I have a lot of endurance athletes that are like, I'm getting slower. Maybe it's just menopause, maybe it's perimenopause, whatever. But they're thinking the answer is more exercise, less
Less food.
food.
Yep.
I
And it
I mean,
always
not to interrupt you,
backfires.
but, like, that's the trap, right? That's literally, and I'm interrupting because I want to give you or
Please.
share an important part, because we struggle with this in our industry as well. The thing is there's two things that prevent you from progressing, and those two things are more volume and less food. Literally, those are the two things that stop people from progressing. If someone comes to me, if both of you guys came to me and put an athlete on the screen and said, this person's been training, 12 hours a week for 5 months, and look, their numbers are stagnant, they're not recovering, like blah blah blah. Like, can you come up with a solution for that person in 5 minutes? I would immediately like cut down the volume, add more carbohydrates, more food, and increase the intensity. And you would get that person to go faster. And like you have to raise the ceiling.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but what you're saying is like literally like exactly how it works.
Yes.
So true.
Okay, hallelujah, because, I mean, I trained with you a couple years ago when I was doing the French Alps. So I did like, I didn't do the 1-day rando or whatever. I did it in 2 days because I was like, I just don't have the time. But, racing those 4 big mountains in France, ending up Alpe d'Huez, which was just amazing to ride up there, and, like, the vibe and the spirit and energy. But I noticed, like, the kicker, like, you don't have to go out every day and spend hours and hours and hours on a bike. How important is an indoor cycling session done right, like on a Wahoo kicker or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I found a majority of the people with jobs and lives, they have to utilize the indoor training.
Yeah.
It's so efficient, and for me when I first started my business, I wrote a lot on the indoor kicker. It's really hard to argue with having everything set up downstairs with Zwift and run downstairs. Put your clothes on, fill up your water bottle, put your shoes on, and you can
Just
Yeah.
go.
dive right into a workout where, yeah, I mean, it does take time if you're going to ride outside, and especially like with the traffic and stuff, people with jobs, a lot of times the times they can train are the busiest times. So
Yeah.
I think the kicker is extremely valuable, or the indoor trainer is extremely valuable. What we do that's different than a lot of other people is we do a lot of technique training alongside of the intervals, and so it's not just a straight interval session. It's similar to like what you do with athletes in the gym,
Mhm.
where you know it's as much about the technique when you're doing the motion, and
Mhm.
when you're doing the strength components and the aerobic components as it is doing it right. Because if you think about it, sport is neuromuscular. Strength training is neuromuscular. The motion is training your brain and your muscle to connect and be efficient in that particular motion. If you're not doing it correctly, like if you're not doing the right technique, you're not necessarily getting the benefit. And people that are training indoors, it's easy to sleep on the technique, right? It's very easy.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
see a lot of people really struggle from going inside to outdoors because of these things.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot with technique on the intervals, and then the way that we combine the different exercises. So it teaches a style of climbing, a style of riding in a headwind, a style of riding in a tailwind, style of riding in a group or in a pace line. All these things, um, it translates back. So if you train those things, you read the workouts, you listen to the coach, um, you can take a lot home from our program. You know, I'll conclude on the people that do all the things, and I'm sure you guys see this in your strength training. People that do all the things, like all the
Yep.
stuff, right? The diet, the sleep, the mindset, the technique, the consistency. Those are the people that just thrive,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? And you wonder like, why do people don't do all the things? But I've been guilty of that too. And you know, you kind of have to have one of those moments where when you do all the things and you have that breakthrough, right? Um, but yes, you can get extremely good in an indoor trainer, but doing all the things together, you can get exceptionally good.
Yeah.
So I know that you guys have coaching for new cyclists. So do you think anyone can be a good cyclist if they do all the things?
Yeah, I mean the beauty of cycling, is that it is possible for everybody to be able to do it at a good level, right? It's a cool sport that, like how your body is made, that doesn't really affect at the end of the day like what you can do on a bike, because the mechanical consistency of the bike and the way that you have the gears, and you have so many things that allow your body to be efficient with its energy systems and its muscular strength. And then there's the mental component, right, where people can become mentally strong and find mental endurance, and be able to um, use that to overcome maybe some physical setbacks or struggles that they have. So, you
Mhm.
know, the cool thing about cycling is it just brings all those things together. And in Cinch, we have four pillars. So we have fitness, we have technique, we have nutrition, and we have mindset. Those four things, like if we're talking about a new cyclist, right? How you interpret those four things
Mhm.
ultimately gives you the direction to get started, right? So, to ride a bike, right? Like you're going to need to fuel your body, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you learn fueling, which is important, right? And you might come from something where you didn't fuel super well. And so getting into cycling really teaches you how to fuel. And the cool thing about the bike is there's a lot of grace, right? So because it's so efficient.
Mhm.
And so you could mess up on your fueling, but still be able to complete 1.5 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour bike rides, right? And so there's time for you to learn it, but then when you do learn it, you learn how to take really good care of your body. Mindset is, I think the bike is the best for, and new cyclists, they are able to really learn mental techniques and mental states that will help them off the bike, from the bike, right? So just a simple bike ride can give a beginner, that personal confidence, right? From taking on a challenge that they were not sure that they could accomplish, and
Mhm.
then do it, right? Like you don't need a lot to get going to be in that situation, right? Like just take a new cyclist, or Haley here, who loves to ride up to Ward, right? Like you can probably think of your first Ward ride, right? Where it's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna aim this bike up this giant mountain, and I'm probably not sure if I can get there or not,
I'll
but like
try. Yeah.
when you did get there, right, it was like your life changed in that moment where you're just like, I can do anything,
Yeah.
and it's really empowering what the sport can do. And grit is a big part of cycling that I think a lot of people can really use in their life. And cycling just by nature is an endurance sport, and it's just kind of this repetitive grind by what it is,
Right.
right? It's like literally like churning the pedals, over and over and over until you get where you want and get what you
Yeah.
want, which is ultimately like the keys to success in life, right? Like if you aim your bike toward and you keep grinding until you get there, right? Chances are like you're going to get there eventually, and you're going to get exactly what you want when you get there, which is fitter, stronger, like able to see that from the top of the mountain, whatever it is. And all those things work really well in life. So I think cycling is an amazing sport for new people.
Well,
The community side of the cycling, in Cinch, we have an amazing community, but the community side of the sport is incredible too, right? Because when you join cycling, when you get into that sport, the people that you meet are all kind of going after similar things, right? Like
yeah.
Mhm.
there's really no one in cycling that's like trying to cut corners, or like not get better at
Yeah.
something in their life, or not see new places or meet new people, or get healthier, or whatever it is. So you typically run into people that have similar stories to yours, and it creates this really cool bond that can really help you in your life. And just meet some great people, and like Haley, traveling the world with these people, right? Like it's kind of an excuse to get out and do cool stuff and see amazing things, and make you a healthier, happier person. The last thing that's important for two things that's important for new cyclists is the fitness side of it, right? Like the cool thing about cycling when you start is you're not efficient at it, and so you get fit pretty fast, without risking injury, and
Yeah.
and uh, you know things that you can getting hurt, that you can really risk in other sports. And then
Mhm.
you learn like technique. If you learn it straight away, like those things can, once you get better, can help you prevent injury and illness and things like that, over time, and just help you be ride a lot safer and be stronger. So I think it's a great sport for people when they're just starting out. And the last thing I'll say on that, and I'm pretty long winded, but like in Cinch, like we don't teach like beginner technique or beginner stuff. Like we teach beginners good technique and high level cycling, because I think that like if you learn it straight away, the right way of doing it,
Oh, yeah.
you improve so much faster. And I think a lot of other sports kind of like make mistakes here, and definitely a lot of people in cycling make mistakes here where, they get fit on their bike like a beginner, right? Or they think they need to just go start riding around aimlessly to get enough fitness to then get help from someone that knows what they're talking about. You think about your kids, or think about, people when they learn skiing, or like you go to instructors that are like pros that like teach you the right way of doing things.
Yeah.
Kids learn, all their sports at a young age the right way. This same rules, the same
Yeah.
technique, the same things that professionals learn. And I think that's the right way of doing it for cycling, right? And by doing that, people can do so much cooler stuff. And again, like Haley's going over and riding, the Pyrenees. These are the climbs that are in the Tour de France,
Yeah.
right? Like, what sport can you, step onto the football field at in the stadium that the Super Bowl was in, right?
Yeah.
But she can go right up, the amazing climbs that are in the Tour de France, and experience the same things the pros experience at a high level. So I think cycling is very unique for those things, and I think a beginner should definitely take it
Okay,
on.
well, what if you're
Mhm.
terrified to lock in? Because I want to be doing this and going with Haley to go travel the world and cycle, but
Clip
I
in.
mean,
She's
clip
she's
in.
terrified of
I'm
clipping in.
terrified of like clipping in and locking in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate fear, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something that we do a good job at helping people with, like from the beginning, right? Is like giving them the kind of the quick pointers on how to learn this. You still see people to this day, that do like the trips like the Pyrenees and stuff like that, and unclip like 5 miles before, the stop where they're gonna have to unclip, right? Like people with a lot of experience never really learned how to do it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so there are ways to do it, in a way that you can learn fast. Like I've got, two kids that are riding right now clipless. My daughter, she's 11. My son's 14. He's been riding clipless since he was 7.
Wow.
There's easy ways to teach it.
Okay.
So
So there's hope for
but
me.
that I would go get, if you're afraid, like I would just ask someone that knows to say, hey, will you spend 30 minutes with me and show me how to do it? Because and then you just kind of like when you ride, you're mindful of like when you're going to stop and when you're not going to stop. And the good thing about clipless is when you do fall over, it knocks you out of your pedal.
Mm.
So you don't really need to worry so much about falling over and not getting out. You just have to worry about when you're going to stop to make sure that you're doing the right technique to get out.
Okay.
But and last thing I'll say on this is to this day, pros have trouble with this too, right? Like I've fallen over at stop signs before, right? Like
Oh,
there's
Okay,
everybody
times,
this is
has.
making me feel
yeah, like
better.
there's times where you're like flipped in and you look over your shoulder, and then you just go to try to get your foot out and your toe runs in your crank because you're in the wrong spot and your weight's on the same
Yeah.
side as that, and you just fall over. I mean, I did it at one of our cycling camps in front of everybody.
That's hilarious.
It happens.
Okay,
Like
this is making me feel
you're
better.
clipped into your bike,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, it's possible.
Okay.
Okay, so Tom always makes fun of me every cycling season because I literally just got back from riding Ward, Tom. Shocking. Tom's like, "Wow, Haley rode to Ward. Have you ever gone anywhere else?" I'm like, "Listen, it's my
Yeah.
go-to." But for someone, I remember the first time when I moved back in 2020 and I'd gone up to Ward and you mentioned something either on Instagram or Strava or something. And I was like, I feel terrible. And you were like, how many calories did you have? And I was like, I don't know, like 300 in my bottle and maybe like a honey stinger. And you were like, no wonder it sucked, Haley. So obviously you're not a fan of, because I have friends, not anymore. Well,
I
they're
was
still
like,
friends, but
"Oh, a breakup."
we're going. But they would ride these 3 and 4 hour rides fasted.
Whoa.
And like, do you have athletes that ride, 5,000 feet of climbing fasted?
Uh, no, I'm a fasted Nazi. Like, and I'm a carb freak. Um, like I believe that you've got to fuel the zones that you're going to use.
Yes.
And cycling is a unique sport and unique for training that you can be really calculated on how you use your zones, right? So we talk about fat burning, we talk about burning sugar and glycogen, right? You're kind of your two main fuel sources.
Yeah.
With the power meter and with our understanding of how the body works, like with cycling, you can get really specific about what fuel source you're using.
Mhm.
And so, like with our training, like we train both fuel sources because you have to become really efficient at using one and using the other. But then also in cycling, which is really unique, and this is important for you going to the Pyrenees, is you have to be able to switch between the two fuel sources, which is
Yeah.
difficult,
Mm.
right? Because a lot of times the body goes into start using glycogen, it doesn't really necessarily want to go back to the fat, right? So switching forcing it to switch back and forth is very important, especially like on these big mountain climbs where it's easy to start using glycogen
Yeah.
by going too hard at the bottom of one of the climbs.
Yep.
But then when you start struggling and you go to your lower power, a lot of times you've already, eaten up a lot of your glycogen.
Mhm.
You've already exhausted a lot of your fuel resource. Now you're stuck on the mountain and all you have is fat to burn. And it can be very, very difficult. So learning how to start climbs easier and use like those big climbs in the Pyrenees or Ward, using the fat as a fuel in as many places as you can. And then when you're going through the steep stuff and when you're really pushing, using the glycogen as your fuel. So back to the fasting thing, that's like one of the oldest like things that people did for training, which is it's like, well, don't eat breakfast and then go ride, and you're going to lose weight and you're going to build your body's efficiency with using fat as a fuel. And like, you know the funny thing about this is like, well, if you had dinner the night before and you had carbohydrates and glycogen, and then you got up and you didn't have breakfast, like what are the chances that your body's going to use the the carbohydrates from last night, right? Like you're either using the zone or you're not. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't give you, because you didn't eat carbs before your ride, doesn't really necessarily give you a license to burn fat as a fuel. And so it's more about like the intensity that you're using. But the biggest damage that like fasting before cycling does is it just limits what the work you can do.
Yeah.
And commonly I see a lot of bigger athletes try to eat less to get lighter.
Mhm.
But what ends up happening is they're unable to use their high power zones because they have no glycogen,
Yeah.
and they go up climbs like Ward, like a turtle, right? And they don't burn very many kilojoules, right? And their metabolism doesn't get much higher because they couldn't do that much power.
Yep.
And then in fact they don't lose weight. And then when they come home, they're all messed up, right? And they go to sleep or whatever they do, they lay on the couch, they're all jacked up, their glycogen window closes, and then they get dinner time comes along and they're super messed up, and then they drink beer or they whatever, and they have pizza or they have bad food, and then your body says, oh my gosh, thank you for
Yeah.
all these like calories and this carbs, I'm going to store
Mm.
this because you were not giving me any fuel and I don't know the next time I'm going to get it. So thank
Yes.
you very much. I'm going to take this and put this on. And these people are in this vicious cycle of this, right?
Oh
And
my
they're
gosh.
always wondering, like, well, I'm riding 4 hours a day or I'm riding 4 hours on the weekends. Like, why am I not getting lighter, leaner? And it's like, you got to get that metabolism. It's the same thing you're doing with strength training, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got to get that consistency and that muscle working so it is always burning, right? Because the amount of the amount of calories that you can burn, with a high metabolism is way more than you can burn on a bike ride or in the
Yep.
gym or wherever, right? Like it's always going. And so people need to think more long term for
Yes.
this rather than short term.
Well, this is the interesting thing that you said. So for the like, just to clarify, because people think, and I hear it all the time, so I'm sure you hear it. Just because we're using fat as a fuel source, as an energy source, does not mean you're burning fat and gonna lose weight.
I mean, 100%, right? And if you think about how efficient, fat is as a fuel, right? Like there's so much energy in fat. And
Mhm.
so if you're burning fat, if you're using, low intensity to training to burn fat, like think about how much low intensity training you need to do to get to utilize that fat as a fuel, right? Like I always joke with people, but it's like, are you trying to win bike races or are you trying to survive on Mars, right? Like, you know, because like it's
Yeah,
like it, like you could go like and not eat for a week, right? Like I mean,
Yeah.
that's what that stuff's designed to do. And so if you think that you're going to do these 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour rides, with the idea of like burning the fat off your body, you know it's going to it's an expensive way to do it. I found that high intensity training consistently does more for your metabolism and for your body than low intensity endurance for your metabolism and for your body, right? They both have a place for
Yeah.
health and cellular function, and performance, and they both need to be done. But there's a lot of evidence and obviously a lot of personal experience that the high intensity consistent training does a lot more for your metabolism.
I literally feel like what you just said was like like if you couldn't have said it more perfectly. And you interview people and people have different
yeah.
opinions and like you never know what's going to come out of someone's mouth. I echo everything 1,000,000% of what you just said. I mean, this is it. And clearly, I knew you would obviously know what you're talking about, but it's just crazy how much misinformation is out there. So, how important is strength training for endurance athletes, whether they're doing Ironman or cycling races or whatever?
I am always like looking at things from like a high performance
Mhm.
mindset first,
Mhm.
and then I kind of like shift that to like health and wellness uh, perspective and on that. And so I think strength training as a whole, right, like has a high performance place, and specifically in cycling, I think that it has a high performance place in stability of the motions, right? So specifically like the core,
Yeah.
right? Like your ability to translate the power that you're generating on your bike over a long period of time super effectively. At the end of the day, like that's from a high performance standpoint, like that's really the biggest value.
Mhm.
Um, I think that athletes that use strength training to do that are able to consistently do it throughout the year, which is really important. Like if you don't do it, it doesn't continue to work, right? So there's obviously a lot of people that are in the notion that's like, oh, it's winter time, like now I go to the gym and I get stronger, and then the summer I ride my bike all summer and I'm amazingly strong from the gym in the winter time. I think that the benefits really have to be done consistently to really get that performance benefit. Again, back to that neuromuscular piece, like I think it all has to work together to continue to work in the way that you are looking to perform,
Yeah.
right? So then there's obviously like some other things that are important, like injury prevention. So you have tendons and ligaments that often get neglected, pounded from lots of activity, and strength
Mhm.
training is amazing for building them up. Also building the muscles up around them to not like overuse them, which is super important. Bone density is a big one in our sport from a performance standpoint, because if you fall down on the ground all the time, like, and you break your bones, like it's not good. Now, obviously, like most people are not intending to crash, but it is a piece of something that you should be thinking about a little bit when you're looking at your training routine, because it is highly unlikely at some point that you're not going to come to a stop sign and tip over, whatever it is, right? So you need to do um, you know, weight bearing activities to do that. I love plyometrics. Like that's my favorite because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's body weight, it's simple.
Mhm.
You turned me on to
Effective.
the TRX. I love that too. Like, that was, I think that was like your big thing in the beginning.
Yeah, that was my
And I
start.
remember I remember seeing you with the crazy apparatus, and I was like, I think I need that in here. I still have the little hook over here on the door.
Yeah.
I can see it, but I think that's pretty clever for being able to strength train using your body weight and being able to do it in a lot of different places. Working with a specialist is important too, like with the strength training. Like, just like you said, like I'm not a specialist in strength training. I have always used trainers in my past to help me. Like, I wrote a book on core training, and I used my trainer like to help me with the book, right? Like, I came up with the ideas, the motions that I needed help with, and
Mhm.
she created the exercises.
Yeah.
And so for our strength training and cinch, like, it's all the same thing where, I'm saying, hey, we need to work on this motion or this strength or this ability, to help athletes do this, and we create the exercises. So definitely it's important too to be creative, I think, with strength training. Doing the same thing, over and over and over is difficult. I do think there's some motions that are like brushing your teeth where they're non-negotiable, just like
Yeah.
certain intervals and things like that. So you've got to do them.
Yep.
But definitely, like, breaking up, when you're doing plyometrics, when you're doing gym work, when you're doing, isolated work, all those things is helpful. I love how in strength. I just want to say this, like, what I love about strength training is that people accept intervals in strength training. And so in strength training, it is all about intervals. Like, at the end of the day, right? It's like how many sets, and people accept periodization in strength training, right? And if you think about how many people are doing strength training, it's incredible. However, like, that same group of people, the same people, like, are like allergic to intervals on a bike, right? Where in their
It's
mind, they're like,
hilarious.
well, this is the bike is supposed to be fun and freedom and all this other. And I'll ask you right now, like, do you guys find strength training fun?
Oh my gosh,
The
I
best.
mean, I'm
The
Exactly.
obsessed,
best.
Like,
really.
but like, knowing how much you're doing, and knowing your goals, and knowing, like that's what makes it so fun, because when you're done, you know what you've
Yeah.
accomplished.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, strength training is good as, to help people understand that, like, intervals are not sections of, like, not fun activity. Intervals are literally sentences, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
Haley, do 10 squats at this weight, please, in this technique, right? And then you do it, and then you're like, okay, coach, I finished 10 squats, and like, it's like communication.
Yeah.
Without that, it's like the ward ride. It's like, how was the ride? Oh, it was good. I got to ward. Okay. Like, what do like, if you don't have watts and you don't have a goal and you don't have, then it becomes like time, right? And speed, which
Yeah.
is dangerous, right? Because it's the wind and temperature and all these things. And it can be like the gym, right? It's like, hey, how many exercise sets did you get done in this amount of time? Well, you're like, well, I didn't get as many done because this person came and talked to me, and this
Yeah.
person came up, and then this person was on the machine. It's like,
Yeah.
well, did you fail then, or did you complete your workout? But it may have taken longer, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that those two worlds can get more connected, I think.
Oh, for sure. And I tell all my people, 'cause, obviously, you're aware of Stacy Sims, and, she we launched this program together, and we did everything. I mean, we literally were like, "Here's your strength training days. Here's your cardio days. This is what it looks like. Here's some mobility, and then these are your rest days. You don't even have to think about it." Because I try to tell people, I'm like, "Oh, you just need to do this, this, and this," and like, "Tell me what to do."
Break it
Yeah.
down.
And so we put that all in there, but then we have a multitude of people that are like, "Well, how do I add in my, Ironman training?" And I'm like, "Different conversation. What is your main goal? Is your main goal cycling event or an Ironman? Okay, the strength pulls back. It doesn't look the same. You can't beat PR on a deadlift over months and months and crush it on the bike. Like, pick which one that you need to focus on, and that's where a lot of the power, to weight ratio comes because like you said, the lighter you are, if you're going to do these massive climbs, you have to have power, but weight comes into it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's again super neuromuscular, right? Like, and that's a whole nother conversation. But like, what makes a really good cycling performance comes down to how those particular muscles were trained.
Yeah.
And it's the same. I love that you said that, right? Because I think a lot of people look to strength training to increase their power on the bike, right? And they think you know, I'm gonna go in the gym and I'm gonna build all this muscle and then I'm gonna take it out and it's gonna perform on the bike. And it's just like you said, like it's like the two are different. They can be used to springboard one, it can be used to help one, but at the end of the day, like you have to practice the motion with the power that you're aiming to do this the same way. Like I can be
Yeah.
you and I can go on a bike ride right now and I can probably maybe out climb you and then you can crush
You
me,
think?
in the gym on the squats, right? Or
Uh,
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even in your league. I'm not even close, right?
Yeah, you gotta have the
The
goal.
amount of muscle fiber that's required to do, 100 watts is so low compared to the work that's done in the gym,
Yeah.
which is again like the different arguments for the benefits of one versus the other, right? So, um, I think that bottom line is I think they work really well together, but I do think, like you said, I think working with experts in both fields
Mhm.
is the best way to do it. Um, I find it interesting too, like how many people uh, are 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 accept kind of the online general training, right? Without kind of like this specific guidance for different things. Like I feel like something that you've done really well is like making these programs that people can get into, but the programs are very specific on where they're going.
Yeah.
Um, don't really see that so much in cycling so much, right? Like it's like people are just taking on intervals on Zwift or programs and
Yeah.
Trainer Road and all these things. It's like gain threshold power, like improve endurance. It's like these are like basic things, right? Like you
Yeah.
should have a little bit more focus in when you're training.
Okay, so I have 2 questions that I'm dying to ask before we take all of your time. Well, first of all, asking for a friend, how fit can you get in 3 weeks before a Pyrenees trip?
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes back to that question or when we were talking before. It was like, here's this athlete, like how do we make them go faster? And with 3 weeks, like you can do a lot in 3 weeks, and especially like with your background where you have this fitness from your strength training and you are a fit individual. And so I would say that your best bet is and this is what we do in Cinch, is you look for your low hanging fruit, and your low
Mhm.
hanging fruit is your strength,
Yeah.
right? And you look at that low hanging fruit and you say, okay, how can I use this to build my fitness? And so, like the zones that you can climb with, which are going to be important for the Pyrenees, right? Are kind of these like what we call low threshold, high medium. So they're like you know, anywhere from 5 minutes long to 20 minutes long, these
Yeah.
types of efforts. And so if I were you, what I would do is like look and see like what your max 3 minute, 4 minute power is right now. Like do an all out test and
Mhm.
see like what that is. And then I would do an all out 30-second test and I would see what your explosive strength is, right?
Yeah.
And so that 3 or 4 minute is going to look at that crossroads between your muscular strength and your cardiovascular ability, right? That's ultimately the trick of the challenge of cycling, right? It's like this
Yeah.
crossroads between the two. So you're always like working one or the other. So what I'm trying to say is you have this like, you know, engine, the structure that's ready to go. And so you need to kind of like infuse it with cardiovascular ability. And you need to do it in kind of the endurance way, which is like the longer ride. And then
Yeah.
you have to do it in the just between that 30-second power and that 4-minute power to really build that VO2 max into that muscular
Yeah.
structure. That makes sense because your VO2 is ultimately like your ceiling of your cardiovascular engine.
Yeah.
Once you start, riding in the Pyrenees and things like that, like you're naturally going to kind of fall between that endurance ability and that VO2 ability, right? 20 minutes and longer is going to be, you know, probably about halfway between those two. Anything
Mhm.
longer than that is going to be more in that endurance range, but based on your physical ability that you have right now, it should be in 3 weeks you should be able to tap in a lot more cardio, high end cardio, VO2 cardio to
Yeah.
that muscle, and that's gonna change your world. I would not go and just do a bunch of long, easy rides.
Okay. Oh, no, and I love that too because I I mean, we recommend so many, cardio, hit, sit, whatever you're gonna call it, sessions in a week just for the average person, not someone that's racing like this program. Most of my programs are for the general population. But I always am like, people will be like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna get on a treadmill." I'm like, "Are you an experienced runner?" "Well, no." "Then don't go do balls out on a treadmill or you're asking for injury." But with the bike, it's so much easier because you can go on, like, even a Peloton or whatever you have at home that's stationary,
Yeah,
and you can haul and not worry about, unclipping and falling off or, you know, I don't know, losing it on a treadmill and, like, falling it's a safer version, but you can get destroyed if you're doing those intervals right.
yeah, I agree, and I think also like it really helps like connect, like we were talking about, like the muscular kind of ceiling that you have with your cardiovascular ability, right? Like if one is higher than the other, the bike will help you raise the other one up, right?
Yeah,
Through the training, through that high intensity training. Other sports, right? You're literally just completely limited by the weakness that you're trying to improve, right?
yeah,
Like if you don't have the ability to do the technique for a long period of time, you're not going to be able to improve your endurance, right? So, yeah, I think you're spot on with the bike, but yeah, 3 weeks you can do a lot, and like I said, like I would lean into your strength, which is your muscles, right?
yeah,
And try to build your cardio top end to that.
yep,
That would be the hardest. The endurance is the easiest, right?
yeah,
If you think about it too, like that's just fat burning, that like low intensity, that's going to be your easiest thing to tap into, right?
yeah.
So you still got to do some of those, but um, I would do some VO2 stuff like we were talking about, and then I would do some of those like 10-minute um, threshold type intervals to try to build that climbing ability.
Okay, so as we
And that's
wrap
why
up,
last thing I'll say is that's why I don't like Ward because it's so long that you just get lost in this like
it's a
mundane effort,
slog,
right?
nope,
Like
no
Oh my
question.
gosh.
I mean, but it's like what can you, and there's no oxygen. So
Yeah.
it's like what can you possibly do other than like check out the river or whatever, right? Like I feel like we got this you probably see me train on it, the Somerset. I call it the coldest Somerset. It's like a 5-minute climb. Like it's right over here in Longmont. Like get busy on that. Like that thing you can just do work until your legs fail and then you can just creep home.
Oh, we're
Like,
talking
and
about
that's the other thing
Niwot,
about Ward is like,
Somerset, right?
huh?
Niwot, Somerset?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, I'm doing it
I mean,
tomorrow.
but like when your legs fail, like you can get home. But like Ward, like you're gonna have to call Steve or whatever, right? Like it's like if something happens out there, like, and there's no cell phone service out
Oh,
there either. So it's
No.
like
it's a bad
if you
combo.
blow up, like you're literally like coasting your bike all the way to the bottom and then calling from the Greenbrier, you
Yes.
know, hey, legs are gone, see you in
Oh,
an
I've
hour
done
or whatever
that
it is. Like
more
I
than
I'm
once.
not a fan.
Okay, so to bring it back to cinch, you work with women, and I'm assuming you work with all levels of women, all ages and all ability levels.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like well, you've seen this too. Like we've definitely added a lot more focus on the women and the program mainly because I feel like they just do a better job with it. Like you very rarely do you see women complaining about, yeah, like having structure and having, a process and a program. And
Mhm.
the women are good athletes, good cyclists, but they are committed to getting better and they're committed to a program. And so we've been really successful shifting, not shifting, but adding women in. A big focus. My wife obviously is a big part of our business, and but yeah, like we've tripled down on our women's program. We
Yeah.
have lots of beginners, and then um, lots of experienced athletes. So it's been cool. Like they even have like a little clique called Mojoettes. Like they at the
That's
camps.
I
And
know,
adorable.
it's cute.
I mean, the mojo is the women bring the mojo. Like they and the cool thing about the women in the cinch program, like they're good ambassadors for the men too. Like I think that like a badass female like definitely doesn't rub like men the wrong way, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's a woman out there just crushing it, you're not going to see the guys, because
Pissed.
we're
Yeah,
co-ed,
so
right?
true.
Like we do everything together. We do the rides together. We do the camps together. Like we do the events together. But like when they lift the level up, like the guys come up too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's never, but a lot of times like when the guys level gets up and it doesn't necessarily inspire the women as the same way. So I think, yeah, having a good women's program is key to a good, cycling team, cycling community, and yeah, they
I
crush it.
love that.
So where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, all over, but I'm a pretty, I like to talk to people, so I like when people just email me, tom@cinchcycling.com. But yeah, you can find us on Instagram, cinch_cycling, and our website, cinchcycling.cc. And yeah, like we've got a great range of programs, different great range of coaches, camps, all kinds of great experiences. We're working on some new stuff. We're working on online courses, an area that we've been wanting to do, that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and we're finally just doing it.
It's
But I think
exciting.
probably why that's taken so long is just because I love to get out there and coach people in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm always like, well, I could make this video, or I could just go help this person. So I just like open up my, we use Training Peaks, open up the inbox, and there's like 20 people that need help, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll help you guys. You know what I mean? Like, so I can probably improve in that area, but
Yeah. Well, good luck to you and your business, and thank you so much for sharing this hour with us. I I just love to hear from experts like yourself, and I think it's so valuable. I mean, I'm super lucky that you're pretty much a neighbor. So thank you for your time and your expertise, and it's been fabulous just having
I
you
know, I've
on.
loved listening. I'm like,
awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on, and thank you so much. So it's cool to be on your podcast, and it's been really fun following your growth as a coach and a business. And like I said, I remember the TRX days, the beginning, and
I
watching
love
the
it.
the basement studio evolve, and
Yeah.
and yeah, made the gym at Prospect like the place.
Yeah. I love it.
Okay,
Well, tell Courtney we said hi, and we will chat soon.
All right,
thanks.
Thanks
thank
for
you so
coming
much,
on.
guys.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the Body Pod with your friends.
Until next time.